All right, you're good, Allie.
Hey, it looks like I'm doing the introduction, you guys. What is up, you heathens and demons, you beautiful, blasphemous people? Nock is off taking care of his daughter really quick, so I'm the one who's going to be doing the introduction to the stream this time around, just briefly before he gets here. We are going to be talking about the trans panic.
The murder defense. Yeah.
Yeah, the trans panic murder defense, in part because the DC City Council, Washington, D.C., has proposed two bills that may make it illegal. Also, it appears that the StreamYard delay missed my introductory piece saying the same stuff as Naka, so my apologies for anybody who missed that. But yeah, it looks like he's back, so I'll let Naka do his introduction because apparently it didn't record me doing it.
Oh, really? See, it told me we were live. So, what's up, heathens and demons? Tonight we are going to have a great conversation. I'll kick it right back over to Ali. Had a spur of the moment debate on Modern Day Debate earlier today. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. I think I did fairly well. Probably not the best, seeing as I wasn't even familiar with the topic until I started researching it this morning. Just filling in for James. They had somebody back out, and I'm like, I'll argue with an evangelical about anything. I think I won the debate, but it's all perception. But yeah, we're gonna have a great conversation tonight. I've been looking forward to this. Been planning on doing this for a while. Finally getting around to it because just scheduling has been crazy. My work schedule has been crazy. It's crazy again, just completely off kilter again. Completely my fault. We lost Allie. It's completely my fault, basically, because I needed to take Saturday night off this week. So, with that being said, we're going to start this conversation. And this conversation is going to be a broad conversation. We're going to start with, the gay trans panic defense. And this is a very real thing. If you're not familiar with it, you should be, because this is a very real issue of civil rights that we are facing today, especially with an administration like we have today. So, Allie, if you want to kick off the conversation, or Calon, or whoever else, and Calon, plug yourself and stick some stuff.
Criminology is kind of my area.
Well, just as a quick aside for anybody who's in the live chat, I will be grabbing any and all of your super chats and putting them in the private chat here. So if Nuck doesn't read it or put it up right away, it just means that whatever question you're asking or whatever comment you have may be a bit off topic, but everything will get read at the end of the stream. I know there's been some concerns about that, so as long as your comment is appropriate or your question is on topic, it'll be dealt with then. But if it's not on topic, then we'll deal with it at the end of the stream. So this is just a reminder, anybody who wants to help support the show, you are going to get your stuff done. It just might not happen immediately. So, Calon, you are a sociology major, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure that got said, because there have been some complaints about the way that we've been handling super chats and stuff over the past couple of streams, so I wanted to let everybody know that I am on it tonight.
Yeah, you've been really
good.
But
anyhow, yeah. Okay. So, for any crime, there are two components that must be there in order for it to be counted as a crime. There has to be actus reus, which means guilty act, and there has to be mens reus, or mens rea, gender in Latin, meaning guilty mind. So, you have to have the guilty act, and you also have to have the guilty mind. Without both of those components, no crime can be said to have been committed. So what the gay panic defense tries to do is it tries to argue, while there's a reus actus, a guilty act, there is no mens rea, guilty mind, because a person was so panicked by the presence of an LGBT person that they ended up accidentally killing them. Now, the obvious issue here is that I could easily take that and flip it around to any group, and you get justified murder.
Isn't it specifically shock in the bedroom that is the trans panic defense usually? You have to have been physically intimate in order for them to use it.
I don't think so. No, I don't even think it goes that far.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's basically you have to be
I can be killed for my existence.
I know with Matthew Shepard anyway. They never actually had a physical act. It was their defense was Matthew Shepard came on to them, and so they panicked, and I think their defense won, but I'm not.
No,
positive about
their
that.
defense actually failed.
They
The only
didn't lose
reason they
that one.
didn't get the death penalty. Yeah, the only reason they didn't get the death penalty is because I think the father took it off the table.
But I am reading through some other ones, so I'll give you an answer on that from like the consensus of what I'm reading right now, Allie.
Yeah, because according to the website LGBTQ bar, it says generally that it's sexual orientation or gender identity triggered nervous breakdown in the defendant, causing LGBTQ plus panic. This defense is based on outdated psychological term gay panic disorder, which was debunked by the APA and removed from the DSM in 1973. Defensive provocation is one of the ways in which it's used. Specifically, nonviolent sexual advance was sufficiently provocative to induce the defendant to kill the victim. So the main way in which it has been used is the victim perceives a sexual advance and then finds out later that the person was a different biological sex than the gender they were presenting.
Yep. So this is also why the term trap is so bad. Because it reinforces the mentality that there is some sort of trans panic, or that I'm somehow lying in order to get into your pants and tricking you into having sex with me.
For what it's worth, by the way, guys, trap does count as a slur in terms of rule enforcement, in case that was unclear to anybody. Like, it is a trans slur and has been for some time.
Yeah, we had that
and that's
discussion
why...
with a certain little mini... why can't I think of my words right now? A mini manatee.
We have a mini manatee?
I'm talking about Will. So yeah, this has been something that I've been outraged about for quite some time. I've actually this was like the mentality down in North Carolina when I was growing up. Is if maybe it was never like you could kill a person, but you could definitely beat the shit out of somebody if you found out that the person you was hitting on was gay, or that a gay person hit on you. Like even in the locker rooms that when I was growing up in North Carolina, when you were in the shower, there was a very strict protocol, and if you were caught even just like glancing at somebody, you would be labeled as gay, and it. In a lot of instances, it would lead to physical altercations. So, and that's a very miniature version of what this panic defense is. And last I checked, it was still viable in 38 different states. You could use this defense to murder somebody based on an emotional reaction. I don't think we allow that really for anything else. Like maybe for self-defense purposes. But
and self-defense is one of the ways in which the trans panic defense is used as well.
Yeah,
which
there are circumstances where mens rea will kick into action. Like the famous one example is that a woman has a nightmare or night terror, and she ends up waking in a dreaming state and ends up tossing her baby out of a building because she thinks her apartment's on fire. That is an example of a legitimate mens rea, where the woman, as far as she knew, there was a fire, and the only best chance for her baby was to throw the baby out the window, even though there was no fire.
Some schizophrenic folks have also, during delusional episodes or hallucinations, have had that defense as well. Like they hallucinated that somebody was attacking them, or that they were a monster or something and harmed them. Generally, it can't be used for murder, from what I understand, or it's not very effective as a use for murder. But like for assault and stuff, people have gotten off on that too.
Well, yeah, and
it's not usually like, I think, what is it? Don't they get like referred to like a psychiatric ward or something? Forget.
It's defense by, it's the insanity defense. But basically, the
that's
trans
right.
panic defense is considered to
insanity
be,
defense.
the vast majority of the time, it's considered to be a extension of the insanity defense. The person realized that
Yeah.
the person they were being intimate with was not the physical sex that they believed that they were. And so that person, and I'm using these terms very carefully here because gender and sex are separate. Like they were not the physical sex that they believed they were, and so they were so overcome by emotion that they temporarily went insane. That is effectively the sum of the trans panic defense.
And it just really doesn't make any sense to me. Like, even, you know, it sounds like a justification for hatred, because like even when I was that homophobic dude down there, and that was the way, I knew deep down inside that was wrong. Like, you know, part of your Christian ideology, at least the Christianity that I grew up around, the Southern Baptist that I grew up around, was that you do not kill people. You know, and it was like one of the greatest sins that you could commit. You don't kill people. There's really no justification. Thou shalt not kill. And yet they use these justifications to kill people. And if you're not aware, you know, like, trans people are getting murdered, and this is a defense that has been employed successfully numerous times, and it's really disgusting to me. Like, I don't think that you could that to me, it's not temporary insanity. Like, I don't even understand temporary insanity. Like, if you catch your wife cheating on you, it's not a justification to kill her. To me, it's not a defense. There's no justification for that. You walk the fuck away and you get the fuck out of her life. You don't kill her. And the same goes for anybody. Like, you don't kill them.
Yeah, basically,
go on, Calon.
Insanity is used in extreme psychosis and whatnot. With
Naka, are you hearing Calon get all stuff?
Yeah,
or is that...
I hear Calon.
Oh, okay. It was I was hearing her get all robotic.
From this idea.
It might have been my net again.
So yeah, it comes from this idea that somehow having sex with a trans person who you don't realize is trans is somehow traumatizing.
Well, and that all comes down to like homophobia and toxic masculinity.
Right. Anything that doesn't conform to the gender narrative that society tries to place on you is immediately seen as somehow traumatizing or wrong. And that is where this idea of the trans panic and gay panic defense even being a thing comes from.
Well,
go ahead, Allie.
Oh, I was going to say, and, you know, things like society sort of making a big deal out of it. Like, I remember back in the 90s and early 2000s, there was this entire segment on shows like Jerry Springer and, you know, like Judge Judy and stuff like that, where on Jerry Springer, they'd bring people on. This guy's wife used to be a man and that sort of thing. Like, they made this huge deal out of it to the, like, and dramatized the people screaming at each other and, oh, you deceived me and that sort of thing. And obviously that happens significantly less now, but it's very much a part of the cultural landscape. Like, trans people are very heavily othered, and that contributes to this even being potentially a thing.
Right. It is. And that's mainly part of that is also due to people, to ideologues making trans issues more complicated than they actually are. Like, it's not that complicated to recognize a woman as a woman. Or just a man as a man.
Or it's in just a matter of basic human rights. Like, trans rights it's the same old, it's civil rights. You know, civil rights wasn't just about black people. It wasn't just about women. Civil rights was supposed to be for all people. So we're all equal. And yet we hold on to these old traditions and stereotypes and terrors, and allow for these old laws to still exist. And you have to fight to get rid of them because the fundamentals have a yokehold on this country. They don't want these laws to change because these laws back up their fundamental view of what this country should be. We've got to fight to get these laws removed.
Because basically these laws state that I don't have as much of a right to live as a cis person.
Exactly. They're hate laws. They're designed to other you, they're designed to belittle you, and they're designed to give rational justification to the murder of people like you. And we see that happening now, especially amongst Black trans people. It was brought to light in a CNN town hall recently, and it's gone viral. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody talks about when a trans person's killed. You know, you hear about all the other stories. I just heard about a news story about a young Black woman killed by a white police officer in her home. I haven't got the details of it, but it came right up on my news feed. You don't hear any of the stories about any of the trans people being murdered, especially since we've had a very racist administration take over this country. It's on the rise. It's not being decreased. It's actually rising. It's happening more. We need to recognize that this is a problem. This is a civil rights issue that's happening right now, and we all need to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So looking into it, it looks like the trans version of the gay panic defense, which was the original like panic defense that was presented, first happened in 2004. The Gwen Araujo, 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 homicide case. Basically, they were sexually intimate with this person. I guess they were a teenager, and they ended up after they began to suspect that she might have male genitalia, they dragged her into the bathroom and depantsed her, and then beat her to death.
Yep.
So I hadn't heard that case yet. I was sitting here looking through some others, and to me, it's a human issue. It doesn't even I don't even really care, and I'm on record. I don't think that there's any justification for killing anybody for anything, and that includes killing death penalty for serial killers. I don't think we should be killing other human beings. I don't know why I think that. It's just the way that I've always remember thinking. Even when I was a fundamental, even when I was conservative, like I was saying, it was part of that Christianity that I had back then, that you just didn't kill people. To me, there's just no justification. If you can kill people and you're capable of that, then that's something that should be addressed. It's one of the main reasons why I'm against war and training soldiers to kill. Even though I understand that it's needed in a very complex and very complex world, I'm still against it because I'm just against that initial act of murdering anything. I don't, I used to get into a lot of fights, and I look back at that and the pain that I would inflict on people. I feel terrible for that. To me, it's cut and dry. There's no defense for murder. And we shouldn't allow for there to be a defense, especially if that defense is singling out a specific group of our society.
Well, and I want to make it clear that the original plea for insanity in court is important, that it exists. Temporary insanity out of anger or something, maybe not so much. But for people who have severe delusions, and have documented physical mental illnesses, that sort of defense in court can prevent them from ending up in a jail cell rather than in a mental institution, which may be where they need to be if they've decompensated so far that they are, at this point harming themselves and others. But extending that to things like getting angry and murdering a spouse, or panicking because your idea of your sexuality is now questioned because the genitalia in front of you don't match what you expected, that's fucking ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it just seems to me that it's such a slippery slope argument to begin with. Even if you think that a person is justified, or if you believe in this temporary insanity thing, I haven't researched it. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. I mean, it just seems like you can start using this defense even in cases that it doesn't even apply. All you have to do is find out that the person was gay or a trans person, and then all you have to say was, well, they hit on me. because that's what gay and trans people do, and which is just not the case. I don't think most people even believe that anymore. But you allow for this very slippery slope of people to get away with murder, to where that defense, even if it were a viable defense, wasn't even the truth of the situation.
Right. And well, just the idea of that hitting on someone somehow equals that person should die
Yeah.
is
It's insane.
Is itself a product of toxic masculinity. The idea that it's okay to objectify women and others, but yet it's not okay to be objectified yourself because that somehow threatens your manhood.
Yeah, I'm looking at a case right now.
And whatnot.
2015, Daniel Spencer was stabbed and murdered by his neighbor, Robert Miller. Miller claimed that he rejected a sexual advance from Spencer and acted in self-defense when Spencer became agitated. But physical evidence disproved his claim that he was even ever in danger. But his conviction was mitigated from murder to criminally negligent manslaughter, regardless of those facts. I mean, it's just...
How do you criminally negligently stab a person
to death? Yeah, like
it takes a lot. It actually takes quite a bit to stab a person to death. I mean, if you've never worked in a slaughterhouse, I recall, like, from what I've seen from like police officers, it actually takes a lot of effort to stab someone.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of physical defenses put up by, say, your ribs or other, like, bones within your body. It takes a lot of work to get to organs that can actually fatally wound you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like, we often talk about how our system is designed to keep Black people down, and it does. And I've talked about it. I'm politically motivated to do something about it. But we hardly ever talk about how the system's designed to keep the LGBTQ plus community down as well, specifically trans people. And it's time, like, more people. You can say you're an ally or you can be an ally. You can say you're a thing or you can advocate for a thing. And I think more of us really need to take our time to advocate for not only trans rights, but the rights of human beings. This was an issue that should have been settled in our past, and yet it keeps coming back up. In 2004, George Bush ran a campaign. I remember thinking, because we were fairly certain that Kerry had it in the bag, and somehow Bush pulled off that campaign, and he did it in a very specific way by creating ballot measures, hate laws in the southern states and the red states, that basically allowed hate laws to be brought back into our country for the first time since Jim Crow. And now we have these states that have these laws designed to allow hate crimes to basically, you can just get away with it. We need to do something about that. I'm a big fan of ballot measures, free weed here in Michigan. But when it comes to hate crimes and getting rid of civil rights for human beings, then I don't think the people should be allowed to have that say at this point. I just don't. We have established this law nationally now. We live in a different country. You shouldn't be free to hate who you want to fucking hate anymore.
Well, to kill who you hate.
Yeah, kill them. Like, you can hate whoever the fuck you want. It's a free country, but you don't get to kill those people, or you don't get to deny people, which is another issue. Deny people voting rights, like happens down in the South. It's a whole other stream what George Bush did in that 2004 election, or at least a video that I'm playing it. But you have to understand just how our country has gotten to this place we're at now. Trans people just recently, I mean, this is a discussion that we just recently had, because for the longest time, trans people couldn't be public in most of this country. So, I mean, we need to be having these conversations because they deserve their rights just like I deserve mine, and everybody else gets theirs.
Well, and at the risk of a pun here, trans people got very heavily shafted by the LGBTQ community in the 70s and the 80s when they were moving towards like LGBTQ, like specifically LGB rights. There were a lot of people who saw trans folks as potentially being, quote, too weird or too out there for the average person. And so just even the idea of trying to get somebody to accept that two guys could be in love in the same way that a man and a woman could, or two women could be in love in the same way that a man and a woman could, was so radical that they were like, oh, these other people who don't want the parts they were born with, or, you know, obviously oversimplification here, but like, oh, those people are going to be a harm to our cause, and they were thrown to the wayside. And so it's only recently in the past 10 to 15 years that trans rights have even really been on anybody's radar because of that, because there was such a hard fight for lesbian and gay marriage.
Right, and the same thing happened also during like the civil rights era. If you look,
I was going to bring that up, Calon. Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say the same
during the civil rights era. Oh, you can go ahead if you want.
I'm sorry. I think we're on. We must have a delay because we keep like button head. Like I was just gonna say. Like I was gonna say the same thing about the civil rights era. So I'll let you say it because you'll say it so much better than me.
So during the civil rights era, it was actually gay men who were thrown under the bus because Martin Luther King Jr. used religion as basically the glue to tie the Black community together. This had the unfortunate effect of amplifying, so to speak, the homophobia within the Black community. In fact, even unto this day, homophobia within the Black community is still an issue. As is transphobia. That's why a lot of trans people who are killed are Black.
By the way, Naka, Tony put up a interesting comment. He apparently was a part of that particular movement back in the 70s and the 80s. Apparently, it was never dreamed of back then that there were so many trans people, and that was part of the reason. But that doesn't change what I said about trans people kind of not really being included there. And I have a good friend, I nickname him Busy, so I'll just call him that, who was also part of some of those marches. He lived in the South back then, though he moved up here, you know, within the past like 20 years or so. And he was the one who kind of taught me about that a little bit, talking about like how trans people and like drag queens who are different than trans people, like drag queens still identify as male. They just enjoy the pomp and circumstance of dressing up. Like those folks were heavily discouraged from attending like marches and stuff in the South where he was because they were worried that it would hurt the fight for gay rights and the fight against AIDS.
Yeah, and that thing, I think it always happens. Like you're always worried about how you might harm your own cause. I don't necessarily agree with it. Like I think, you know, everybody knows I just rush full steam ahead, irregardless of the consequences. And I'm not suggesting we as a country should do that, but like it's happening even now. Like you know, in this exchange that happened on CNN recently, I think her name is Blossom C. Brown. Brought awareness that even amongst the LGBTQ community and even amongst the trans community, Calon here pointed out that it is a lot of Black trans people that are being murdered right now, and nobody seems to be talking about it. Even amongst the LGBTQ community, there seems to be this hierarchy. It's primarily run by wealthy, rich, white, gay people, and you know that I'm not going to pretend to understand the structures of the community. I just try to be as big of an ally as I can. But I think that, you know, she brought really good awareness in a national spotlight during a Democratic town hall for presidential nominees to an issue that never gets talked about. And it's happening right now. And Calon brought it up. And it is happening right now. People are dying right now. And in the states that it's viable, this defense is being employed right now to justify those hate murders.
Well, and
I could be murdered myself for it.
Yeah, it's not just Black people. Anybody. I mean, anybody. Like, you don't even really have to be a trans. Like, with this stupid ass defense, all you could justify murder and say, "Oh, I thought they were a trans person." You know, I mean, it's just it's ridiculous. It's well, and with it's sad in the modern age is still a thing.
Well, there were also articles about the bathroom bills about particularly like quote unquote masculine women or butch lesbian women or women who had high testosterone and facial hair being, people that were biologically their sex was female being harassed in bathrooms and questioned about their genitalia and things as a result of the bathroom bills. So it's obvious that you can't tell like somebody's sex just by looking at them anyway. Like sex shouldn't matter in the face of gender anyhow, but like even if you want to grant that absolutely fucking ridiculous premise, it still doesn't work. You know what I mean?
I do, but North Carolina didn't.
So I just got a mini dizzy spell, which means that my blood sugar's low and I forgot to eat lunch. So, Calon, we actually have a very interesting comment in the chat, and you being a sociology major, we had a conversation about this topic earlier. IQ brings up this idea of abolishing the word minorities, and I think it would be interesting to have you do a quick breakdown about what that term means sociologically and what the use is in acknowledging the existence of minority groups.
Okay. Will do. You go eat.
All right, I will be right back. When I unmute, I'm back.
So the thing is, not using the word minority is a recipe for disaster. The reason is that sociologically speaking, when we say minority, we don't mean numeric. We mean in terms of power within a society. Blacks under apartheid were a minority despite being the majority of South Africa during that time period because they did not possess power. So you extend the same principle here, and if you were to do away with that term, there would be no way to be able to track how oppressed people are treated, and thus no way to advance various rights. That is why the word itself is important. Anything to say, Naka?
I'm sorry, I stepped away. I'm just getting back, trying to get caught up on where we're at now. What are we talking about right now?
Discord and everything's burning.
All right, yeah, it's probably about time for that.
Also the revolution is happening.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what I need to hear.
Yeah, so and the purge. We're also doing the purge at the same time.
Well, I think I'm not going to say what I was about to just say. I'm going to hold my tongue and be smart for a change. But I was going to have a very snippy purge joke towards a demographic that I probably shouldn't do that towards because it would make me bad. It would make me bigoted. But how I love to pick on evangelicals. So yeah, I kind of stepped away and checked on my daughters, so I kind of lost the track of what I heard something about specific words, so I'm not sure what specific words we're talking about.
Basically, it was suggested that minority we not use the word minority when talking about these issues. The problem is with minority doesn't refer to a numeric minority here. It refers to those who don't have power. So so blacks during apartheid were a minority, despite being the numeric majority of South Africa.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, so right now, say atheists were a majority of America. It doesn't matter because the Christian right still has one political party in its pocket and political power. Yeah, so I totally agree. If you do look at apartheid in Africa, even though the majority was a very slim minority, a very few select number of white people in South Africa, the overwhelming population was the minority in that instance. I actually agree. I don't really even like using the term minority and majorities anymore, unless I'm talking about politics and Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, when we're talking about power structures, that's where it's useful. Yeah, that's where it's
most effective. I think it's not even a thing. To me, it's not even about class or race. It's about class and not race or gender anymore. But I have a very broad view on that. It's a very political view, and it's because I'm not in in those demographics, because I'm fairly certain to trans people it's definitely about trans rights because you're fighting for those rights. I think that it's a power structure and oligarchy. I think it's rich against poor, and they try to other us, keep us against each other so they can hold their slim minority, because they're a very slim minority in this country, like you're talking about, and yet they have all the power. So the only way to keep that power is to keep us plebs othering each other and fighting against each other instead of join forces and revolting against their asses.
By the way, I am back. I did grab myself some food. I went and had, we have these little gummy snacks that we keep around for when I'm stupid and forget to eat. So I had some of those.
Away at the same time, Allie, and just left poor Calon here by herself.
I actually announced that I was going to step away. I didn't announce.
I just turned off my camera. Like, I'm going to go check on my daughter.
Yeah, no, I went AFK because I had a dizzy spell. I apparently forgot to eat again, and I have damage to my intestines from the celiac, so I have to eat fairly regularly or I get low blood sugar problems like a diabetic would, but I'm not diabetic. But yeah, I went and grabbed some food, and I actually gave Calon a topic to ramble about for a moment before I left, because there was somebody in the chat that was talking about the term minority and how they thought that nobody should use it anymore. And Calon and I had actually discussed the meaning of the term minority in sociology.
Yeah, I'm in pretty much agreement. Like, I really don't even like using the terms anymore myself unless I'm in a political conversation talking about the dynamics of our politics here in America. You know, if I'm talking Republicans and Democrats and who's got the majority in the House and the minority in the Senate, then yeah, they apply in those instances.
Well, in sociology, as Calon explained a moment ago, it actually does have a use to talk about minorities. It has to do with who has power and who doesn't in a society. Yeah.
Yeah, and that should be the focus. Who doesn't have the power and who's taking advantage of the power that they have. This is it's almost like the way they've othered Native Americans and not allowed. Most tribes can't even prosecute things like rape or domestic violence or sometimes murder.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so I mean,
yeah.
This is an old technique that they've used.
White people sneaking onto.
Yeah,
with white people sneaking onto reservations and molesting children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this seems like an old trick in an old dog's playbook. The good thing about it is our society is becoming more secular humanist. The younger generations, I'm sorry, but we're a mixed society. The younger generations are growing up. These things aren't as big of issues to them as they were to us. It's a different world from when I grew up as a 42-year-old man growing up in North Carolina. North Carolina hasn't changed much, but it's a different world now. There are places in this country. I would hope a majority of this country that feel like people are just people and they should be able to live their lives. I think we're starting to get there, and give it another generation or two. And you want to talk majorities and minorities, then we can really talk about that in those cases, because I think most people are coming to the terms that people are people. Let me live my life and you live yours.
Well, and I think that it's important to point out, you talked about class division, but I think, and Calon, I would love to hear your opinions on this, because this is something that I've noticed here in Washington, but I've seen it other places. It's not just a divide between rich and poor, I think. I think it's also a divide between cities and towns, and between the country and the city. There is a massive difference between cultures in a small town or out in the country than there is in cities. In cities, you're constantly bumping up against each other. Your next door neighbor or the person you have to sit next to on the bus may be a different color or sexual orientation than you. It's a lot harder to be bigoted in that sort of environment, especially if you're raised there, versus if you are raised in an all-white small town of maybe 200 people and have never seen a black person in your life, but you've seen lots of movies where they're the bad guy.
Yeah, as a person that grew up in a small town in the South, I can definitely back it up. You're in a bubble. People talk about bubbles, and I think a lot of times people talk about bubbles that don't actually exist. Down in the South, you're in a bubble, and you don't get out of that. Rural America, they just elected one of the most bigoted presidents that we've had in a very, very, very long time. And it's because rural America, they do have this disconnect. They have this mentality, you're not going to change our ways, our traditions. even when those traditions and ways are atrocious and goes against the type of people that they actually are in real life. Like most people don't want to see people murdered no matter what, like most people don't, like even deep in their hearts, they just don't want it. But yet they don't want to be changed by this belief that they have. Because if you attack that, well, then you're attacking their ways and who they are. And it's complete and utter bullshit. People up here in Michigan claim Southern heritage.
So, to most accurately describe that phenomenon of towns, cities, farmland, and all those various things, we're talking about a wide swath of demographics here with varying degrees of wealth and education as well. So instead of like not viewing these divisions as something that's like necessarily separate, that places one category over another and various things of that nature, it's more accurate to look at how these various factors come and intersect with one another. So the experience of a rural, gay, black man is going to be vastly different than a white, gay, city boy.
Well, and especially if that white gay city boy grew up in an affluent neighborhood or something, it's more likely that his gayness will be accepted as an eccentricity, or just kind of tossed to the side, whereas that African-American man growing up in that small town may have some very dire social consequences.
Yeah, may actually be murdered or get boiling hot water poured on them. Yes, there was a case in Georgia where that happened.
I was trying not to say the very, very bad implication of that. Sorry. I'm eating, so.
I like saying the bad implications because it just drives home the point. Like, yeah. That's why I say very directly, I could easily be murdered for getting naked.
Yeah, very good point, Calon. Like, maybe this is why I can be so, staunch in my stance on this, is I actually see it. Like I research this stuff. I'm aware of this stuff. I see the pictures. I see the brutality, and I think people need that. I think they need the reality. They need the truth. They need to see it. They need to understand what's going on. That's the only way they're going to be connected to it.
So here's another way to put it. How many people are familiar with Emmett Till?
I am.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that case.
Yeah. Open casket. Why? Because his mother wanted people to face the reality of what they did to her son. And I'm much of the same vein when it comes to human rights. When it comes to human rights, you need to see what exactly it is. Especially if you're against certain people's human rights, you need to see exactly what you are doing to people. Well, what your bigotry is contributing to society.
Well, and I think that that's a really good transition as well to another sort of point I wanted to add on that. There are a lot of folks who grew up in small towns who have had their hackles raised when I made statements like that on, say, lefty streams or in a server or something that'll be like, well, I had a black neighbor and we got along just fine. But I think there's also this image that's often built up. And Naka, you can correct me on this. Calon, you can give me better terminology if you want. But there's this image that's built up of specifically African-American people from the city where they're sort of demonized and considered, almost bestial. They're othered to the point of no longer being human. And I think that there's a certain amount of that happens to trans people as well. Where, if it's not somebody you directly know, or sometimes even if it is and you've had enough training, if you've had enough conditioning to the point where you find it so utterly repulsive that you react violently to it or feel you must because of whatever fuck training you ended up getting, it's almost the way that soldiers on the battlefield are trained to see their enemies as no longer human. Once you've dehumanized somebody to that point, they no longer exist in your mind as being another person. They're just they're the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Dehumanization is a huge issue when it comes to that. And mainly the route it takes is we generally get labeled as perverts. Just men wanting to be women so that way we can get into the girls' bathroom or some other nonsense like that.
Yeah, I've literally heard right-wing propaganda about how high school boys that come out gay are just trying to get into the girls' locker room so they can see the girls naked. It's just the dumbest shit, and yet the dumbest people actually believe it. And you don't even have to really be dumb, because like I remember being that person, and you just it goes against what your perception tells you is not. Like, this was the argument that we would use, is this isn't natural. Just speaking about just gay people in general, is it's not natural, because it comes from that Christianity, and it's instilled in this country, that Christianity, that man is for marriage is for a man and a man wears man clothes, a woman wears woman's clothes. Even though, like, what men have worn has changed drastically over the centuries, and what women has worn has changed drastically over the centuries, especially since the time of their God. Like, literally, men don't wear what men wore back then. Like, they don't quite grasp that it's a new world now. It's a new time. People are allowed to be themselves now, and they just can't grasp that one simple fact, because they have to be right. Their perception has to be right, and so they put themselves in a bubble.
So, Calon, do you have any more to kind of expand on that, on the idea of, like, say, the African-American neighbor being perfectly fine because, well, we know them, they're like us, versus, seeing some, like, person even from another neighborhood, let's say, in a slightly larger town, wandering through your neighborhood and suddenly being scared?
Right. So the thing with privilege is that you can be disadvantaged, you can be unprivileged in some areas and privileged in others. So your black neighbor, what does he most likely have the privilege of? Well, of being in your similar SES class, socioeconomic class. What else does he have? Well, he could be a man or a woman. He's cis, so he has that privilege working for him, assuming he's cis, of course. And most likely he'll have a similar education level too, especially since, his income bracket has managed to make him your same neighbor, which also means, now, granted, his experience in school and whatnot is going to be a bit different. He'll probably have encountered a lot more racism. He'll also probably have had to work like 10 times as hard in order to get to where he is today. But that is usually left in the past.
He likely also, like, Rilla brings up an interesting point. He likely also is able-bodied.
That too, yeah. Likely, although I have, on occasion, though I think it's rare in the disability community, I have seen the same scenario described with disabled people, but that's another subject, and that's one I actually have to personally research, because ableism is probably the most subtle and insidious ism that's out there. It's the one that tends to go unnoticed, even to the extreme to where we have movies like, what was the one? I can't remember. Where we'll have Oscar-winning movies, which are basically extremely ableist, winning awards.
Yeah, there was a movie that came out not too long ago that I think was at least nominated for an Oscar. It was where this gentleman was, like, physically disabled, and he hired somebody to take care of him. And, like, that person helping take care of him stopped him from wanting to kill himself or something. I think that was the plot as it was described to me.
Yeah, right. You have the typical messianic complex. The person can't bring himself up. He needs somebody else, yada, yada, yada. Various. We can do a whole stream on ableism at some point, and it would be fun.
Yeah, Rilla said she'd be interested in coming on for something like that.
Huh?
I said Rilla just said she'd be interested in coming on for something like that. Nock and I are actually working on getting the next 2 or 3 months worth of streams scheduled out. And we can probably schedule that one out pretty far out, because I know that that's a topic that Nock and I have both talked about, because I've got mental disabilities, and we've talked about that being a problem before.
Right. That would be a fun stream we can do. I say fun, but it's actually horrible.
Yeah, like,
it's horrible.
Ableism, I would say ableism and, sizeism may count as ableism to a certain extent, but those two are kind of the two acceptable forms of like, discrimination in society. People don't get harassed near as much for them.
Like, if we're talking about dwarfism, that falls under ableism.
No, sizeism is a term that's often used in the body positive community to refer to the privileging of like thinner bodies over larger ones and the harassment that overweight women get, particularly.
Let's see. Oh yeah, and AR will.
Yeah, I was about to go
Yeah,
ahead.
we'll get that. We'll get that stream up. But yeah, so basically, if you're disabled, you're not privileged. So where was I? Oh yeah, I was talking about your black neighbor.
Yeah, you're talking about the intersections of privilege. He also likely goes to the same church that you do if you're in the same neighborhood.
No. Actually, I don't think that's as likely. The churches are going to be segregated because black churches are very different than white churches.
We're talking about a very small town here, so like you're 150 to
If we're
200
talking about
for
even a
town.
small town, it's going to vary. It's going to vary, I think. I have to double check the statistics on that, but I think it would vary even there.
Just speaking from my small town experience, like the more wealthy black people would go to the white churches, but
yeah,
and that's who we're talking about here. We're talking about your middle class black neighbor.
Oh, okay, if we're talking about middle class, I was talking more generally.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're talking about middle class, then yeah, I can see that. What else about your black neighbor? Your black neighbor also probably just drove down your house prices because real estate is inherently racist. But that's beside the point.
It depends on the area you live in. You and I had a conversation earlier about how, like, you know, there's a pretty decent spread of like minority folks in, say, middle class neighborhoods.
You live in nice liberal land.
Yeah,
yes,
I live in liberal land.
Yeah, you're in like the mecca of progressivism here in America. So
yeah, here I'm the opposite. But yeah, so of course you're going to identify more with that black neighbor. Now, if I take you and place you into a ghetto where there's drugs on the street, crime is an everyday event, various things of that nature, you're going to come around with a very different position. So, yeah, in short, just because your friend is black doesn't mean a thing. You can still be racist.
Definitely. And it's...
In fact, black people can be racist themselves.
Exactly where I was going. One of the key points of that interaction on CNN was when Don Lemon, a black gay man, took the microphone away from Blossom and pretty much said, you know, hey, you know, we're letting you speak now. Here, take the microphone. I'm literally giving you a microphone now, even though it had been an issue. A guest had been invited, can't quite remember her name, really big in the Elizabeth Warren campaign, who I will say, for full disclosure, if in my opinion, the best candidate on LGBTQ rights right now is Elizabeth Warren. I say that as a Bernie guy. This guest was supposed to be on this show and represent the black trans community and their issues. And then they basically just used her visibility and then tried to sideline her last moment. And that's why Blossom came into it. So this moment of this privileged black gay man looking down on this activist trying to stand up for black trans rights became a major issue, and it's a major issue being debated right now.
Which it's unfortunate that these things have to be debated because usually it's actually pretty clear cut.
Yeah, well, it speaks to privilege, you know, like, you know, Don Lemon, and I actually like Don Lemon a lot. I like him a lot. I think he does really good news. He's one of the few on CNN that I actually do watch. But there's no way he can understand the perception or the plight of a poor black trans person, either male or female, either man or woman. You know, there's no way that Don Lemon can put himself in that in those shoes. And CNN had basically just been called out for quieting that voice. And then to sit up there on his high horse, not to let her on the stage, which is understandable because you got presidential candidates up there, but to take the microphone away and then hand it back to her saying, hey, we are giving you a microphone now. It was a major issue, and it speaks to the dynamics of everything, you know.
Yeah, media and just social issues overall tend to really suck.
Yeah.
Like, they have no clue what
you know, and I do give props to CNN for at least trying to do something. You know, a lot of outlets right now aren't even talking about these issues. It's black and white. It's not, they don't go in depth. That you'll get your 30-second clip about what's happening in the Supreme Court, and that's all you get. We need to all understand what's actually going on. The only way you're going to do that is by talking to people and trying to find out what's going on.
Well, not just talking to people. You actually have to listen
to people. Yeah.
Experiences, because I've had enough cisplaining in my life. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of people, I think, also just listen to show people that they're listening. But yeah, what are you actually doing about it, and what are you learning from that?
So coming back to kind of the original topic of the transpanic defense, I think that all of this, when we talk about the intersection of class and race, that means that lower class minority trans folks are going to be, in accordance with these theories, the most targeted demographic when it comes to the transpanic defense. And lo and behold, those folks are overwhelmingly the ones that we not only hear about in the news, but the ones that are recorded.
It's almost like we just made a falsifiable proposition that's already been tested, isn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of one of
What science does that? What science tests propositions like that?
Well, I mean, sociology is just a soft science, Calon.
All right, I'm taking Aliakai from the stream.
Sorry, Calon, I'm the mod.
There, I'll take you.
Mod is God.
Sorry, Calon. I'm the mod, unfortunately. But no, I was trolling you. Like, legitimately, it's funny, people who deny intersections and ignore this sort of data. It's just like when you talk about the missing Indigenous women and how, like, folks don't go looking for them. It's the same problem. You have the intersection of race and class, and so when crimes are committed, the police are far less liable to do anything about it. The same happens with particularly trans women, but it also happens to trans men.
Mm-hmm.
You have this deep ingrained just prejudice in people, and people don't like to admit their prejudices. They don't even like to admit their biases, as Calon will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So
I may have triggered a lot of people's biases in the past, or I may not have. Just
your existence triggers people's biases, Calon. Yeah. Like, let's face it.
They don't even like to admit to those little things that they're not even like in control of, right? So it's a hard thing approaching people with their bigotries, but ultimately it's a human thing. You have to get to know people. Like, the more people you get to know, the harder it is to hate them. This otherism, this making one group better than the other, is exactly what the people in power want from us little people down here squabbling. And you're right. You cannot ignore all of the little nuances of the argument. You need to be involved, and you need to understand it. And if there's something you don't understand, then damn it, learn it. Learn it. I'm having Calon on right now because there's nobody that I know that knows these issues better than her. That's what you got to do in this life. You've got to learn this shit.
Well, and like, there was a very, very good series that was done specifically on the alt-right. It's called the Alt-Right Playbook. I believe Non-Compete may have been the one who did it. I'm going to grab a link that you can put in the description if people are interested in it. But there was a particular episode of that series where Non-Compete talks about safe, quippy, short, and wrong is significantly easier to remember than complex, nuanced, and true. So short, quippy, and wrong is what people, like, if you and I were to have a debate, and let's say I was taking the position of a conservative fuckwad, like, if I say, like, chicks don't have dicks, like, that's short, it's quippy, it's wrong as fuck, but it's easy to remember. And so the audience, even though you might have to go into a much more detailed, explanation as to how that's not the case, or Calon would go into a detailed explanation as to how that's not the case in the way that gender works, like, chicks don't have dicks is easier to remember than the nuance of that argument. So even though you might be in the right, outwardly, short, quippy, wrong, and authoritative sounds like it's going to win to the sort of people that don't necessarily have the desire to get into the education.
And that feeds their innate biases, and it feeds their prejudices that they don't even want to admit it to themselves. So I mean, that you're right. it's a Trumpism. It's we live in that era now, and it's not because of Trump. Trump's just a symptom of it. Trump just utilizes it well. This has been going on for a very long time, and you're exactly right. And there's really no way to fix it outside of just, I don't know, talking about it.
Well, I mean, social pressure can help to adjust it, right?
Yeah.
Like LGBTQ, like gay marriage is something that's being thought about significantly less. They moved on to trans people because at the Supreme Court level, like nationally, gay marriages are now required to be acknowledged. If you get married in Nebraska, then, or in Iowa, then Kansas has to be okay with the fact that you got married. Like
The tried and true way is activism and protest, and that's why they're actively trying to attack our First Amendment, our First Amendment rights now to protest, and they're getting away with it in a lot of red states. So, I mean, we need to be aware of these things. These are our tools. And yeah, you might not like gay and trans people, but they can come after you next. I mean, it's that old adage
that old adage that comes from World War II. At first, they came for the socialists, but I'm not
exactly.
So I didn't speak up. Then they came for so and so and so until finally they came for me.
Yeah, you don't even have to agree with the people you're protecting. All you have to really do is want to protect yourself. But damn with that, because you should want to help people. People are people. Human beings are human beings, and unless they give you a reason not to want to help them, you should want to help them.
And in addition, I think, to protest and such, I think it's also very important. This is why own voices are so absolutely key. Like Calon was talking earlier about listening to people of color, about the experiences of people of color. She talked about, being cis-blamed too, about what's okay as a trans woman or not. We saw on Twitter, and this might piss off a few people in the audience, I don't really fucking care, and I don't think you do either, like ContraPoints got her ass ripped open on Twitter for making comments about being a trans person and how the normalizing of using they them that has been pushed forward by non-binaries has made life a little bit harder for her because she wants to be she her, and people are starting to just call her they them because they're more comfortable with it. She was talking specifically about her own experience, but she got lambasted for like being quote unquote not woke enough, even though she is a trans person talking about her experience being a trans person. Like, we need to listen to trans people about their own experiences.
Yeah. I don't try to pretend to even know what that experience is. I just try to support humanity. When it comes to ContraPoints, she does remarkable work. Like I don't know. I'm a fan. I'm just gonna say that. I've said it before.
Calon, I don't know if you're like tapping on your mic or what, but like you're bumping up against it again.
I'm not.
Well, it says that you are.
I know. I'm gonna make that T-shirt so we can start selling it. What was it? Hashtag Calon's mic.
Hashtag Calon your mic.
Yeah, Calon your mic.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, listening to minorities, not shutting minorities down, not telling them their experiences are invalid. Oh, also the ever so fun attack the tokens, because there are some people who will betray minorities because they want to fit in with the dominant crowd. I'm not going to name specific names, but I've seen some trans people go so far as to defend hate speech.
Caitlyn Jenner.
That would be one. I mean, in this community specifically, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this actually is a really good place to sort of move forward to talking about like folks who, are like internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia, internalized racism, etc., and folks who take that to the next level and will defend their oppressors. Like, do you want to kind of give a quick definition for like internalized transphobia and sort of some ways that you see it in the community?
Internalized transphobia is hating yourself because you're trans. It's the same thing as it's roughly a mirror phenomena. Mirror phenomena is actually a better descriptor of it. It's a mirror phenomena of internalized racism. It's the kind of racism that Black people end up having to internalize because of the oppression, because they're told they're not worth anything by white society. Same thing happens to us trans people, and you'll see And over time, it can lead to various self-harm, suicide, that's another result of that, and just in general depression and whatnot. So for some people, and sometimes it's not even an internalized depression that causes this. It's mainly because they see the best way to move forward for themselves alone is to work with the dominant group. They will actively turn against others, against their other people that are within the same minority class. I think Caitlyn Jenner is a good example of this. What's the name of that fascist black lady? Ali, okay?
Oh gods, are you talking about Candace Owens?
Yeah, Owens. Candace Owens is a token. She will actively defend policies which harm the black community and prop up various white nationalistic policies, in fact. So she's an example of a token. And yeah, they're usually a dime a dozen, especially around
Blair White, I think, is one of the big
Blair
ones
White.
here
Yeah,
on this
Blair White
community.
is a token for the right, basically. So yeah, those kinds of people do not represent really any sort of form of legitimate minority perspective, because they are actively harming the minority community that they claim to be a part of.
Jesse Lee Peterson is another one that folks are bringing up, and I would add to that. I'm trying to remember. Do you remember the surgeon who ran in the
Ben
big
Carson.
Republican clown car?
Yeah, Ben Carson.
Yeah, Ben Carson's another one, I think.
Yeah. So tokens abound, unfortunately. They drink the Kool-Aid of the dominant narrative, as Patricia M. Collins would say. Patricia M. Collins, for those who don't know, is basically the founder of intersectional theory, which is a major perspective within sociology that helps elucidate a lot of these concepts. Her particular work about the matrix of domination and various things like that are texts that I would highly recommend that you read if you're studying how systems of oppression tend to work to filter people into various sort of positions and keep them oppressed. So, yeah.
So what would you say the major advantage that these people gain would be? Because to a certain extent, you're erasing yourself, right? Like you and I talked about personal erasure earlier when we were talking about my identity issues.
Yes, so what they gain is usually some sort of status, so like they'll get money. The way resources work, speaking on a social level, is that you have three kinds of different you have capital, which is how much wealth you have. You also have social, which is who you know. And then you also have political, which is how much political power you basically have. Basically, it's a trade-in of I want to say it's basically trading in social capital for some political and economic capital is how I would put it. And then they get put on a different, what we would describe as a field, in other words, a different social plane of existence, basically, where all of a sudden the social currency, that is, the behaviors which elicit decent responses, as in they get you praise and various other things, are behaviors that actively throw the minority, who you probably at that point don't even have much contact with at all, because, I mean, really, what black person is going to want to tolerate Candace Owens with the proper mind?
So
at that point, currency.
Oh, I was going to say, that's an interesting point, because CC Sleeper actually says, in their humble opinion, labeling people as tokens can be viewed as a dismissive and an unwillingness to tolerate a difference in opinions. So do you have any commentary on that from a sociological perspective?
Say that again?
CC Sleeper says, in my humble opinion, labeling people as tokens can be viewed as dismissive and an unwillingness to tolerate difference of opinion.
The thing is here is that a lot of what I'm saying is an opinion. It's scientific sociological fact.
Well, and I would say
That's what a lot of people don't realize, is that sociology is not an opinion. Yes, there are debates. Yes, there are things you can disagree on. But when the data comes in and it's repeatedly shown on basic stuff, such as systemic racism and whatnot, it graduates to an embedded theory, which is actually a term I like more than saying scientific fact, because that's technically an oxymoron.
well, and I also
So it's not a different. Go on. Sorry, Knock.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll let you finish, and then I'll pipe in.
So when it comes to these kinds of policies, we do actually have a pretty good idea of what will work and what won't. So it's not just a matter of opinion. It is whether a person is actively doing harm or not. In the case of Cadence Owens, she can whine all she wants about her opinions not being tolerated, but the fact still remains, her opinions harm Black people. And that's something that I personally, and many others around me, don't see any use in tolerating.
Well, an opinion ceases being an opinion when you're pushing it forward as a potential policy.
Well, and also what I was going to say is I think motivation has a lot to do with it as well. Like, so if somebody really truly believes a thing, then I'll sit there and I'll give them their belief system and just think that they're wrong. But with Token, when I think of a Token, and speaking of Candace Owens, I know I've been covering Candace Owens for a long time. Before Candace Owens was Candace Owens, or, you know, before that's what she went by, and she was going by Red Pill Black, doing her Life of the Coon series. I shit you not. I used to cover this shit all the time on my old channel before anybody really even knew who she was. Candace Owens is a liberal. Candace Owens sold her soul to the Koch brothers, much like Dave Rubin and people of that ilk. They sold their ideals and their ideology and their belief systems for money. To me, that's a token. Candace Owens is doing harm to the Black community. I don't think she should be given room, legitimate room. The same things I say about Kent Hovind and Matt Powell now. I learned my lessons with them. They're not honest actors. They're not going to have an honest debate. Candace Owens isn't going to have an honest debate. I don't know much about Blair White, but what I've seen of her work, I think she's appealing to a right-wing crowd. She's being that token trans woman, saying the things that they want to hear.
Blair White is the trans woman. Candace Owens is Black.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Token Black.
I don't know much about Blair White, but I have seen a little bit. I've seen a couple interviews on Jacqueline Glenn, and I watched her channel just a little bit, trying to figure out who the fuck Blair White was because people were talking about her. And she seems to appeal to a right-wing crowd, saying a lot of shit that is right-wing rhetoric.
Blair White,
like I said, I don't know her very well.
So Blair White is trying to bring back the term transsexual to distinguish, like, trans people who have transitioned and or desire to pass from non-binary people, trans people who are not concerned about passing, and gender fluid people like myself.
Yeah, see, I'm just not too sure about Blair White, but like the Candace Owens thing, like I definitely label her as a token because, like I said, I know she was a liberal. She doesn't have these beliefs, and she's done harm not only to the Black community, but to a particular person. Candace Owens and the white right-wing douchebag, can't remember his name right now, actively used Kanye
Dave
West.
Rubin?
Who?
Dave Rubin?
No, not him. It's Charlie Kirk or something like that. They used Kanye West's mental illness against him. Turn him into a Trump supporter. The same Kanye West that said George Bush doesn't like Black people is now actively supporting one of the most racist presidents in the history of the world because Candace Owens actively used his mental illness against him. I think she's criminal for this. I think she's criminal.
And Blair White actually harassed the hell out of another trans YouTuber who had not yet gotten the money together to work on transitioning or to get on HRT or anything, to the point where they were near suicidal. Speaking of which, Calon, I'm curious what your take is on a lot of the Blair White stuff and on the, like, attempting to bring back the term transsexual to distinguish non-binary people from, like, trans people who want to get on HRT and transition and all that other stuff.
Non-binary people can transition.
Well, yeah, non-binary people can get on, like, androgen or estrogen blockers.
And so therefore that makes the whole point of bringing back the term transsexual to distinguish non-NBs from binary trans people useless, because they can transition. It doesn't matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think that she's trying to use it specifically in a transmedical context. Like, she doesn't like bringing up the idea of body parts mattering, but that seems to be, like, the body parts transition seems to be the main focus of her desire.
Yeah, no, she wants everyone to adhere to the same societal standard of femininity that she does. And that in itself is an actively harmful view, because it's equivalent to the issue of holding up a societal standard of beauty that young teenage girls do that ends up getting them into eating disorders such as anorexia.
Yeah, if we want to go into eating disorders at some point, I have a lot of stories to tell. I can say that beauty standard is incredibly harmful, but I think this is a fantastic opening since we are talking about the trans-panic defense. I know that you have some very strong opinions about the term passing, and the desire that a lot of people have to both talk about it for some trans people that are desperate to do it, the sort of pressure on trans people to do it, whether they like it or not. And given that trans-panic is in part like an excuse that if somebody passes well enough, that somebody is, and I'm going to use this term with a gigantic set of air quotes around it, somebody is fooled that their body parts do not, match the ones that they expect, like that so much that they're driven to madness somehow. I'm curious what your thought is on that.
So the term passing creates an interesting counter. Not pass to
it creates foil. A binary.
It creates a foil to it's kind of a bit held back by this other idea that somehow you can be mentally insane driven when the body parts quote don't match up, end quote. And I think over time it's going to take a while, but hopefully one day body parts won't be associated with gender anymore. But I don't have much. But yeah, basically the more you pass, theoretically, the higher the probability is, depending on where you are and the numerous other factors, or the higher it would be, I should say, because I haven't read the literature on this. The higher it would be that you could be the victim of trans-panic.
But at the same time, the more likely you are also to be treated as your preferred gender, or the gender you identify as, in this case, by society as a whole, meaning that your dysphoria will be less likely to be as triggered.
Right. So it's about, you can see it as sort of a balancing act, if you will, which I should really get up to date with the hate crime statistics.
Yeah, I meant to actually look them up, Calon, and because of the debate earlier, I haven't had any time.
What do you use for hate crime statistics? Because I have some pretty good sources. Okay.
I couldn't even tell you offhand. I just Google shit. I do have Tony Designs, who has offered to help me with his vast resources as well. But usually I just Google stuff, and I make sure that whatever website I'm on is legitimate.
So what you want to use is what's called the UCR, the Uniform Crime Report. And it's given.
Yeah, I never used that.
And that's a good source. So is the NCI, the National Crime Victimization Survey, NCVS. That is another good one. It kind of reaches under and gets a little bit more of that dark figure of crime, which for anyone who doesn't know, the dark figure of crime are all the crimes that are unreported, but we pretty much can guess.
The SPLC also does keep hate crime statistics, and they also track hate groups and stuff like anti-trans, gay, and anti-minority groups.
Yeah, I like studying them when I study extremism.
That'll be really useful because I am planning on doing a video very soon on spikes in hate crime since the Trump administration took over. So yeah, those I wrote those down.
So in terms of the quote problem of passing, you and I have talked extensively in the past, Calon. Like, do you want to talk a little bit about the pitfalls of the pressure on trans folks to pass?
So by pitfalls, basically passing, as I would define it, is the pressure to adhere to societal standards of a binary gender.
Mm-hmm.
You can technically have NB passing, I guess, which would imply that there is a societal category for androgyny.
Which, honestly, androgyny tends to be a bit more close to what we would associate as, like, young, boyish type figure.
Yeah.
Or prepubescent. Like, it's heavily associated with youth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with youth. So, but we'll save NBs for another time. So when it comes to the binary in terms of passing, it is extremely harmful because for some people, they simply will not ever be able to meet that, nor should they meet that standard. Yet they are constantly told and abused that they have to meet that standard. So basically, it's a harmful idea, and the degree to which you pass should only be a version of individual. God, I'm not thinking. Of individual preference, really. If you can look in your mirror and like what you see, then you pass, is what I'm going to say. So.
Sorry, daughter saw a spider. I'm like, well, kill it.
But I don't know why. I don't think so.
I'm sorry, Calon?
I said, I'm a snake, so why am I even talking about this? No, I'm kidding.
So, coming back to, I guess, the trans-panic defense, Naka, you said that you wanted to discuss some of the cases in which the trans-panic defense has been used and your feelings on them. We've talked about one or two of them.
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize some human beings that have lost their lives and some of the circumstances around it. I'm reading from the LGBTbar.org website, and it's their page on the panic defense and relevant cases. Jennifer Laud, 2014, I already spoke of Daniel Spencer. In 2014, U.S. Marine Scott Pemberton was stationed in Aglaga City, Philippines, where he met Jennifer Laud. When he discovered her transgender status, he choked Laud until she lost consciousness and died. The Philippine court found Pemberton guilty of homicide, but the judge claimed the charge could not be elevated to the level of murder. So this happens all over the world. Ever Orozco in 2013, 69, was viciously stabbed to death by Stephen Torres, 22, under a subway in Queens. Torres claimed that Orozco blew kisses at him and made other sexual advances. Torres was convicted of second-degree murder. In that case, it didn't work. Marco McMillian was the first openly gay man to run for office in Mississippi. In February 2013, Lawrence Reed choked McMillian with a wallet chain, drowned him, doused his body in gasoline, and set it on fire. Reed admitted to the murder, but insisted he was defending himself against McMillian's sexually aggressive advances. Prosecutors presented strong physical evidence showing no indication of an attack by McMillian. Reed was sentenced to life in prison. Francisco Gonzalez Fuentes, Pedro Garcia, and Wilfred Sanchez beat Francisco Gonzalez Fuentes, placed him in the bathtub, and stabbed him to death before dismembering his body and packing it into garbage bags. At trial, Garcia stated that Fuentes had told others...
Can we just have a moment of silence to think about how fucking brutal that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
Dismembering the body and packing it into garbage bags.
It's horrible. You know, the previous one, doused his body in gasoline and set it on fire. Like, you are no longer seeing these people as human beings. And there's no defense. There's no rationalization for that. These are brutal, horrific murders.
Well, and you can't possibly claim that that was temporary insanity that caused you to premeditate to the point that you cut a body apart, which, as we mentioned earlier, stabbing is not easy. Fucking cutting a body apart and butchering it ain't easy either.
Oh, it's perfectly easy if you're a sociopath.
Yeah, I mean, these are the faces of this is hate crime, and this is what we gotta fight. I mean, this, Calon said it. She could be killed just for being herself. In America, in the modern age, yeah, I think we need a moment to ingest that. I definitely do. I'm gonna step away for one moment because I've not only do I got goosebumps, but I am a little sick. I did read those earlier, so I knew what I would be reading, but reading them again doesn't make it easier. So yeah.
Well, and I mean, you were kind of rushing through that one a little bit, but like setting a body on fire and cutting it apart and stuffing it into garbage bags, like that is fucking brutal. That is disgusting.
Yeah, you literally are not seeing these people as human beings.
Yeah, I've heard worse.
Well, and if you keep reading that section, at trial, Garcia stated that Fuentes had told others that they were in a relationship, and Garcia attacked him because he was terrified that someone would think he was gay. The prosecution argued that Garcia was Fuentes' live-in boyfriend. Sanchez was sentenced to death, and Garcia received 60 years after agreeing to testify against Sanchez.
Yeah, that's usually how they go.
Like, this isn't even temporary madness. Like, they tried to use this case, and he was just scared that his reputation would be damaged.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, if you try to hide a corpse after you've killed someone, that immediately shows mens rea.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, no defense there.
All right, we'll do a moment of silence after everything, but I just wanted to stop and like process that because we were jumping through it so quickly and like, oof, that's fucking brutal.
Yeah, it's hard. Like when I was reading through them, I mean, some of them the people get away with it, some don't. But I think there's no denying the brutality of these murders, and that this is going on today. This is going on now. In our country, and we need to do something to stop it. We got to do something to stop this shit, to allow human beings to be human beings. I don't know what it is. I'm not for, authoritarian dictatorship. I am for the free foundations of our society. But when is freedom freedom and when is hate hate? I mean, we got to answer these questions.
All right. Since I finished up the last one, we're on Terrence Hauser. If you want to continue.
Yeah. Can you read that one, and I'll read the next one. I'm going to give my daughter her nighttime shot.
It's just interesting to think. Just sitting here listening to these cases again. Any of those cases could be me.
Mm-hmm. Or me, for that matter. Like I am bisexual. Like this sort of thing could potentially happen. It happens to women too.
Yeah, but it's more likely to happen to me.
Mm-hmm. Significantly.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to ingest, and it's what I think really. This is why I wanted to do the stream, and this is why I wanted to bring Calon on, because I know Calon, and I couldn't imagine anybody wanting to do these things to Calon or to anybody, for any reason.
I can think of some people who would probably want to do that to me.
Yeah, so you have a lot of people on Twitter that know you too much.
Calon, for what it's worth, when I said it happens to women too, what I was talking about specifically was the missing indigenous like women thing. Like I wasn't in any way denying that. Like I realized that could have sounded badly, and my ADHD made me skip words.
You're fine.
Yeah, I think that there's no denying that being a trans woman in America might be one of, depending where you are, might be one of the more dangerous things to naturally be right now.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're not upper class or upper middle class, like you're definitely in a lot of danger.
Yeah. Caitlyn Jenner probably doesn't have too much to worry about. Although, there are plenty of crazy rednecks out there. And I sorry, not to paint all rednecks as that bad words, but crazy people out there. But yeah, we can read a few more. It goes on and on.
Well, there's only like 4 or 5 more, I think. So I think we can get through all of them on this site.
Yeah, so 2008, or go ahead, Ali.
Terrence Hauser, 2008. Terrence Hauser was stabbed 61 times by his neighbor Joseph Biederman. During his murder trial,
61?
Biederman claimed that, 61 times.
Do people realize how much energy that takes? That guy was enraged.
That
might be one of the most extreme cases of stabbing that I've ever heard about. And I've had previous girlfriends that loved those damn shows. And you heard about, I mean, you know, those passion crime shows.
Like 81 times before. That's the highest I've heard.
61 times. Holy shit.
I'm like, wow.
So, during his murder trial, Biederman claimed that he passed out and woke up to Hauser holding a sword against his neck and attempting to sexually assault him. Biederman claimed to be in such a panic that the only way he could escape was to stab Hauser 61 times, but evidence from the scene showed few signs of a struggle. The jury acquitted Biederman of first-degree murder.
He was acquitted did they charge him a second degree?
It just says he was. It doesn't say anything more. He was acquitted.
I wish it said more.
Okay, he was acquitted. All right.
Well, we could look it up really quick if you guys want.
I'm assuming though, because they've included the failures, that this is actually a
gay panic defense gets murder defendant off. He was entirely acquitted.
Wow, 61 times and he gets acquitted.
This is NBC Chicago for folks who are interested. I'll read off the beginning part of the article. How do you stab and slash someone 61 times, not just killing but slaughtering him in walk 3? So asked the Tribune's Eric Zorn after a Chicago man was acquitted in the violent killing of his neighbor, who the man claimed tried to rape him. Joseph Biederman, now 30, admitted to repeatedly stabbing Terrence Hauser last year. Both men were at Hauser's apartment after a night of drinking. Biederman claimed he passed out, and when he woke up, Hauser had a sword to his throat, demanding that Biederman take his clothes off. Biederman said that started a fight in which he grabbed a dagger and stabbed Hauser repeatedly while trying to escape. Such quote-unquote gay panic defenses have been used in several high-profile cases, often unsuccessfully. Prosecutors argued that Biederman's story didn't add up. The apartment showed little signs of struggle. 2 wine glasses on a table weren't overturned. Biederman was larger and not as drunk as Hauser, and there was no way he would have needed to stab Hauser 5 dozen times to escape, prosecutors argued. And rather than immediately call for help, Biederman returned to his apartment soaked in blood, showered, and went to a hospital before his girlfriend eventually called 911. But those arguments didn't stand with jurors who acquitted Biederman on first-degree murder charges. The jury wasn't allowed to consider second-degree murder charges, a gamble by the prosecution that didn't pay off. Biederman's attorney, Sam Adam Jr., said the verdict wasn't anti-gay, it was anti-rape.
No.
It's disgusting. I mean, it's disturbing. Like, there's no way you stab a person 60. Like if you're afraid for your physical safety, you know, you might slash a guy, you might even stab him 1 or 2 times. 61 times. No.
You want to make sure that person.
Well, and he went home covered in blood, took a shower before his girlfriend called 911.
And it sounds like a classic case of hetero-curious shame. Well,
it said they were both drunk.
The person was experimenting, and I don't even know. Like, it's hard to put your mind around that story. It's just hard to even grasp it. This was a story that I read earlier that I read several times, and I couldn't even really bring myself to look it up like you did, Ali. It's hard to grasp. 61 times.
Just to say something in the chat, if you actually look at the research on jurors, it's really depressing. This is just one case. There are other cases, and this is even beyond trans stuff, where you look at the way jurors think and whatnot, and it's like, what the fuck?
Wait, I mean, some of the stories of police officers getting off scot fucking free, it just blows the mind.
Well, I'm also like, there are several times where in domestic abuse cases, they'll be like, well, why didn't she just leave?
Well, here's another thing though. Like, if you're talking about jury selection, I was actually called to jury duty and was dismissed because it was a rape case, and like almost every woman that was in the selection room was all dismissed because it was a rape case. Because they asked, has anyone here experienced some form of sexual assault or know somebody who did? And almost every woman, I think there was one left who did not walk out after that question.
Yeah, rape is really, people think of it as something that's really rare. It's not. It's at best uncommon.
I don't even know if it's necessarily uncommon. Like just the more.
Well, no, I said it's at best.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is I'm dividing it by locale.
Yeah.
So depending on your environment, it usually ranges from uncommon to common.
Well, it's fairly common. Like, I think it's 1 in 3 women will experience rape within their lifetimes, or sexual assault of some kind in their lifetimes.
Because up if you talk about college campuses. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so, like, if you then take 1 in 3 women, and most women have friends who are women, that means that there's almost no chance that you can, get away with either not experiencing it or not knowing someone who has experienced it.
And it crosses the world, the demographics, culture, race, religion. I mean, it's everywhere. It's in the atheist. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it's very scary if you actually get into the numbers of sexual assault, especially when it comes to women.
Well, and like trans women also have even higher rates of sexual assault than like cis women do.
Oh yeah,
47%, by the way, is the rate. It goes from 47. I've seen estimates as high as 60% for trans women.
I wish I could remember the name of the trans woman that CNN had initially gotten for that town hall. I can't remember her name. She was recently on TYT. Did a whole show with TYT. You can find her there. Remarkable woman. She actively speaks about the sex industry and the trans community. She advocates, and she literally tells you like how especially Republican powerful men actually seek out trans sex workers, and it's quite known throughout the community, and it's one of the things these Republicans really fear the most. It's really fun. She does phenomenal work. I wish I could remember her name. I've known of her for quite a while. She's very highly involved in the Democratic Party. I just can't remember her name at this moment. Brilliant woman. Go check her out on TYT. It's very recent.
Knock, it is your turn. Larry King, 2008. This one was a really high-profile one. Like, I'd be surprised if any of our viewers hadn't heard this story.
Name sounds familiar, but I'm thinking of the CNN guy. Larry King, 15, was an openly gay student who expressed himself by wearing makeup, accessories, and high heels. King asked fellow student Brandon McHenry to be his Valentine, and McHenry shot King execution style in the head. McHenry's attorney claimed that his client was sexually harassed by King and therefore was not culpable for his death. The jury could not reach a unanimous decision, and the case was declared a mistrial. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's another example of toxic masculinity. Women actually have also been the victims of that. I remember in criminology reading over several stories where a woman will reject a guy for the date, and then the guy will come and kill the woman.
I mean, that's just.
By the way, if you want to preserve your faith in humanity, don't take criminology.
Oh, I'm glad I never did.
It will rip you to shreds. But yeah, that's a case of.
So to make it even more brutal, Larry King, also known as Letitia King, apparently was kept alive on life support for 2 days before they finally perished.
Wow, like the level of insanity to take a 15-year-old child trying to find themselves, to take them asking you to be their Valentine and to go get a gun and I mean, I'm assuming execution style means just point blank range.
It means point blank, but it usually means one shot to the back of the head.
Yeah, and this says it was 2 shots in this article.
I mean, it's just the level of insanity to be at that point, and I think it speaks to not only bias and bigotry, but indoctrination of fundamental Abrahamics. It's part of their culture.
It's part of it. I mean, it's also part of European culture, though, in general, in terms of going all the way back with patriarchy and whatnot.
So apparently this one does have an ending to it. The first trial was declared a mistrial. The second trial, prosecutors dropped the hate crime charge. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, and use of a firearm. So not first-degree, but second-degree murder. And this was 3 years later. He was convicted, given 21 years behind bars, initially in a juvenile facility, then in prison upon turning 18, with no credit given for time served prior to the trial or for good behavior.
Well, okay, so what that also means is that he was tried in adult court.
Yes.
So there's that too.
Yeah, it's fairly hard to convict children of anything. So yeah, I mean, at least there was some justice there for King. I don't want to say the male name that they list here.
Well, it says that Larry King, from every article that I've read, Larry King, there's a number of them. If Larry King identified as female, I'm pretty sure some of these news outlets would have given him her
you're
pronoun.
Right. Yeah, I just heard you pronounce the other name. I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna go there again. All right, so we'll move on to the next one. I think we're almost done with them.
Yeah, we're down to the last 4, I think.
Yeah, so
Angie Zapata.
Yeah, go ahead, Ali.
In July of 2008, 18-year-old Angie Zapata met 31-year-old Alan Andrade, and they spent 3 days together, during which they had at least one sexual encounter. When Andrade discovered that Zapata was transgender, he viciously beat her with a fire extinguisher. Upon arrest, Andrade said that he thought he had killed it. Oh, there's that dehumanization. Andrade was found guilty of both first-degree murder and a hate crime and was sentenced to life in prison. So at least that one has a quote ending of justice there.
And it is important to point out, and I think it was pointed out earlier by me and you and Calon as well. Like most of these cases do end up in prosecution. It's not like this is a defense that wins, but the fact that it's a defense that's allowed in 38 states is an issue. That only activism, only talking about it, only demanding. When I speak of activism, I speak like people know what that means. That means at the very least you should be calling your senators at the very least every day. I mean, I call my senators all the damn time, but I'm an activist. You've got to be active. That's the very least you can do. Then you can start thinking about joining groups, getting out into the community. But the first thing you should be doing is calling your senators, because ultimately, even though they like to deny it, they answer to you.
And yet again, I want to point out the brutality: beaten to death with a fire extinguisher and called it.
Mm-hmm.
Disgusting.
It's that classic dehumanization, just like you pointed out. It's that inherent demonization of human beings from whatever indoctrination it stems from. I'm not going to put it all on, because many, you're right, Calon. This isn't just a thing about religion. This has been ingrained in a lot of cultures for a very long time.
In this case, it would be toxic masculinity. You also tend to find in a lot of these cases, or at least I do, could be a sampling bias. I haven't done a statistical analysis or anything, but usually when it comes to these kinds of cases, the more toxic the masculine personality, the more brutal it's going to be.
All right, you're up, Knock. Got Gwen Ritchie Phillips.
All right, yeah, Gwen Ritchie Phillips, 2003, was strangled to death before being placed in a suitcase and dumped into River Lake. Police arrested Joshua Cottrell for the murder. During the trial, Cottrell's defense attorney claimed that Phillips made unwanted sexual advances and attempted to force Cottrell to have oral sex. But friends and family testified that Cottrell invited Phillips to his hotel room and posed questions of a sexual nature before attacking Phillips. Cottrell's aunt testified that the murder was premeditated. The jury forewent charges of murder or reckless homicide and convicted Cottrell of second-degree manslaughter.
See, this is a place where it worked.
Second-degree
right? They didn't get them off, but second-degree fucking manslaughter, that's what you'd get if you hit somebody with your car.
Yeah, you had the person's own family saying it was a premeditated murder. I mean, the own family of the dude.
Well, and again, strangled to death, dumped in a suitcase, and then dumped into a river.
and set up the interaction. Like it's fairly, just from reading that, that's fairly apparent. Like the dude actively sought out Gwen Phillips. The Richie's in quotation marks, so it's Gwen Phillips. Um, actually sought her out and premeditated this crime and still got off pretty much. I mean, yeah, they did a little time in prison, but let me tell you that killing a trans person isn't like being a pedophile in prison. In fact, murderers get a certain weight of respect in prison. This is not justice. Not justice at all.
All right, Gwen Araujo, which we talked about at the beginning of this. Gwen Araujo, a 17-year-old transgender woman, met Michael Magidson.
Just call him Maggots.
Michael Maggots and Jose Morel online, and the three engaged in consensual sex several months later. Now that wasn't part of the article that I read earlier. Several months later, Magidson and Morel discovered that Araujo was transgender. They beat her repeatedly, strangled her, tied her up, and hit her with a shovel, killing her. At trial, Maggots' attorney claimed that Maggots' violence was caused by the shock of discovering that Araujo was transgender. The jury deadlocked. In a second trial, however, the jury rejected Maggots' claim and found him guilty of second-degree murder. Several months fucking later, that's not second-degree murder, that's first-degree murder.
Yeah.
And that can be any trans person. It could be me. It could be your son. It could be your daughter.
And it can be any gay person, because this defense in these states apply to gay people as well. Just, I mean, if you're in this community, if you're in this, LGBTQ plus community, I mean, there's areas of this country it's not safe for you to be who you are. And any of us should try to put ourselves in those shoes. Any of us could be those people if they decide to turn on us. If you're not willing to stand up for the people that need it the most, then you're not willing to stand up for yourself. That's just always been my opinion.
So I would like to point out, like AR pointed this out earlier, but so far we've had maybe one or two, like typically European last names. The vast majority of these last names that we have read off have been Hispanic, African American. So like this idea that even in the case sampling, like here on the LGBTQ website, which the only qualification for getting on here is being a high enough profile LGBTQ murder case that this defense was used in, like what, 8 out of 10 of them have ethnic last names?
Yeah, and I think that was covered a little bit on the CNN town hall. Good, I mean, it was, kudos to CNN for doing more than most. But yeah, I mean, I think the stats pretty much show that colored people face the worst brunt, whether you're black or brown.
And this has to do because for black people, they internalize the Eurocentric view of masculinity. For Hispanics, it's pretty much the same, actually, the more I think about it. And so not only do they treat gay and trans people bad, but also cis women as well because of their culture.
So, like, AR just sent an article from the HRC, humanrightscampaign.org, and they have stats from 2018. At least 22 transgender people have been killed in the United States since the beginning of 2018. 82% of them were women of color. 64% were under the age of 35. 55% lived in the South. We say at least because the stories detailed in this report very likely undercount the number of transgender people who were killed in the United States this year. Although advocates, bloggers, and media groups have elevated the crisis in recent years, data collection is often incomplete or unreliable when it comes to violent and fatal crimes against transgender people. Some victims' deaths may go unreported, while others may not be identified as transgender in the media, often because authorities, journalists, and/or family members refuse to acknowledge their gender identity. In life, each of the individuals memorialized in this report went to extraordinary lengths to live authentically as who they were. war. In death, we must honor their bravery and action.
So, one good thing to always state: whenever we're talking about crime statistics, always assume that it's the conservative estimate. Like, always assume there's more, because there are a ton. Forget what it was, like 72% of crimes don't go reported.
Oh yeah. I found this out, unfortunately, when I did do my research into sexual abuse and sexual assault in this country. A vast majority of sexual abuse and sexual assault, even when it comes to little children, just goes unreported.
Mm-hmm.
It's either unbelieved
because,
or it's unreported.
Well, yeah, and it's often dismissed. Like, even when my ex ended up getting put in jail for breaking a cereal bowl over my head, like, it took 4 or 5 calls to the cops because of how calm he was when they came up before they finally did anything. And at that point, it was because there was a shattered bowl on the floor and cereal in my hair. Like, they couldn't deny it at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think some areas of the country are a lot better, and this goes back to that discussion earlier in the conversation where we're talking about maybe city life and rural life and the divide. But even in city life, domestic violence here goes unchecked, and I think depending on the culture of your city, like here in Michigan, it's definitely more purple. Some culture here, it would probably, the cops would probably definitely look the other way if you're a trans person and they held these biases and prejudices. And unfortunately, a lot of people still do. That's why we have to be advocates. If you're not in the community, it doesn't mean you be quiet. No, you've got to fight too. You, in any way that you can. You got to learn as you go. Calon will tell you, Calon has helped me learn as I go. For the last 6 months, Calon?
Something like that. It has been a while. I forget how long I've been actually a part of this little community. It's been a while. Huh?
Yeah.
We are on the last 2, Knock, and you are up.
All right.
Ahmed Dabaran.
Ahmed Dabaran.
So I think.
So
one.
Yeah, was an assistant district attorney. Go ahead, Calon.
One thing that I'm going to suggest that probably this channel should start doing is, like, at the end of the year or so, just have a scrolling list of all the names of all the trans people who have been killed that previous year.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think I will do that. Yeah, I think I will. I just got to figure out how to scroll shit.
Yeah.
It's easy. I see people do it all the time. I'm like, I got to figure that out sometime. I think that would be a perfect time to figure it out. And yeah, I think it's something that I really, it's why I wanted to I found, this website and wanted to at least give some acknowledgement to some more of the severe cases and really give some kind of a visual aspect to the conversation. Because we can sit here and talk about this defense that, until I actually researched it when I was doing my research on my video for Matthew Shepard, you just don't think about it. You don't hear about it. You don't know about it. Even if you knew about it back in the day, it's not something you think about very much. This is an atrocious thing that
Calon?
You should be aware of.
Yes?
Did Knock just go out on your screen too?
Yeah, he did, actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was just making sure that wasn't my net connection. Knock, your camera died.
My camera died?
Yep. You are a scroll bar right now.
Huh. That's really... You guys can still hear me though, right?
Yeah, they said that they can still see you, but like for both Calon and I, your camera just got knocked out. That was weird.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah, chat can see you, but we couldn't. That was weird.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, sometimes Richard Madsen's upside down for you, so...
Yeah, but I asked Calon if it happened for her too, and she had the same problem. So like it was both of us, and we're not on the same network. Like we're across the country from each other.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here like looking at StreamYard, and I didn't cut out at all.
Yeah, that's bizarre that both, like, I think it's probably a StreamYard problem. Like, it was probably StreamYard cut us, but not the stream.
StreamYard is technically still in beta, so they're still figuring out their stuff. I'm hoping it gets better. I like it, but there's some things that could be improved about StreamYard, I think.
So this one's a really brutal story, like especially because it has a very terrible ending in terms of justice. So like the Ahmed Dabaran one, if you want me to look it up and expand on it, I can, because this is when I heard about it.
Yeah, go for it. I'll read it, and then yeah, you can expand on it. So Ahmed Dabaran was an assistant district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia. He was struck over the head over a dozen times by Rodriguez. I'm probably mispronouncing that because it's a Q, not a G. But I'm just going to say Rodriguez, Rashad Reed, and died from his injuries. At trial, Reed's attorneys claimed that Reed killed Dabaran to protect himself from unwanted sexual advances. However, a medical examiner testified that Dabaran was asleep at the time of the murder. The jury acquitted Reed of the murder despite Reed's full confession. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, this is one that this is one of the cases that put the so-called gay panic defense on the map.
That's hard to even fathom. Wow.
Yeah. Like this is a really particularly brutal story. Like the coroner testified and the guy gave a full fucking confession and the jury was so biased they acquitted him.
That's absolutely insane. Holy shit.
Yep. Welcome to juries in America. This is why, by the way, about 60% of homicide cases end in a plea deal. Because juries a lot of the times are incompetent.
But yeah, sorry, my cat's bumping my mic around.
Good kitty. What?
Yeah, she like ran her butt into my mic. She's trying to crawl into my lap, and it's quite difficult for her. But yeah, the gay panic defense in this particular case, like the article sums it up. The little blurb there sums it up pretty well. Like the motherfucker confessed completely, like, and they still acquitted him. And like it's kind of held up as the classic, this is why people use the gay panic defense. Like when people talk about it, like this is the case that tends to spark the most outrage.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
as soon as I heard Georgia, I knew. Yeah.
Wow. I mean,
as I heard Georgia, yeah.
I don't think I read. I didn't read that one earlier. I must not have went all the way down that list because that's like I didn't read that earlier. Holy shit! How? Yeah, Georgia. Like Georgia, what the fuck? and Georgia is definitely one of the states that I was speaking about earlier. That had red ballot initiatives in the 2004 campaign that were basically hate laws, allowing hatred to be lawful. And you don't hear about this. In fact, what you see is a great whitewashing of the George Bush presidency, which is a great shame and probably the saddest part of the Trump administration.
All right, and Scott Amadure or Amadure, I'm not sure, Amadure. Talk show host Jenny Jones was hosting a show that discussed the topic of secret admirers. Jonathan Schmitz was invited to participate and was surprised and embarrassed to see his male friend, Scott Amadure, confess to having a crush on him. 3 days after the show, Schmitz drove to Amadure's home and shot Amadure twice in the heart, killing him. At trial, Schmitz argued that he suffered from diminished capacity due to the gay panic disorder he experienced when Amadure revealed his attraction on the Jenny Jones show, which rendered him unable to plan the killing despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The jury reduced the charge from premeditated murder to second-degree murder.
So here's a good question. Does anyone want to argue now with me about trans people not being oppressed?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that there's any way you can look at stories like this, but even just at this society, even in our stage of advancement and our progress we've made, and we've made a lot. There's no way to deny that the trans community, the LGBTQ community as a whole is under attack. There is a case in the Supreme Court that's being heard right now. I think that's going to deal with the gay marriage issue once again, if I'm not mistaken. And but beyond that, like as Calon has said repeatedly, I mean, you're my audience. You're familiar with Calon at this point. This could be
I've been
Calon.
here a few times.
This could be anybody. This could be AR. I mean, this could be anybody, and we need to stand up for our fellow human beings. It's just disgusting.
And I
This
mean,
defense should not be able to stand. This should not be a viable defense. Prove your innocence if you're innocent of murder, but don't justify it.
so would anybody mind if we had a quick moment of silence for the names that we just read off and the 22 people that died in 2018? The gods know how many have died this year, and all of the various years prior due to this sort of violence. Like, does anybody mind if we do that? Because these are some pretty fucking brutal stories.
Yeah, let's have a moment of silence for the dead, and let's try to save some people in the future.
So, finishing up, there is a little bit of good news, and that is that the Trans-Panic Defense has been banned in California in 2014, Illinois in 2017, Rhode Island in 2018, Nevada, Connecticut, and Maine, Hawaii, and New York this year. There has been legislation that has been proposed but not yet passed in Washington, D.C., in 2017. There was an article about it that I shared at the beginning, that they're considering putting it back on the floor. New Jersey in 2016 and 2018, Minnesota in 2018, Pennsylvania in 2018, Washington, my state, in 2019, which, by the way, it is currently finishing up its second round in committee and should be on the floor pretty soon. Texas in 2019 and New Mexico in 2019.
Wow, even Texas. Texas.
In July of 2018, the Gay and Trans Panic Defense Prohibition Act of 2018 was introduced by Senator Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, in the United States Senate, and by Congressman Kennedy, Democrat, also Massachusetts, in the United States House of Representatives. All of the recent to-be-passed bill attempts are still currently pending.
That's good news. Progress. Yes, progress.
Progress.
Probably a lot of states taken off of the 38 that I had seen.
So for folks in the chat that are interested in what you guys can do to help, I highly suggest, especially if you're in the Bible Belt or if you're on the East Coast or in a more conservative state or a swing state, I highly recommend going to the USA.gov website for elected officials, which I can post in the chat really quick. Get into contact. Physical written letters, or typed letters in physical envelopes, are far more effective. They take longer to get to, but they are more likely to be paid attention to because you actually put some effort into them than, say, like an email form letter. Get into contact with your senators, with your representatives, figure out who represents you and send them something telling them to back this bill. This is a bill that is going to have a damn hard time. It might get out of the House, but it's going to have a damn hard time passing the Senate with a conservative majority right now. This is something that if you are worried about someone that you know or love, if you're worried about Calon, if you're worried about AR, if you're worried about non-binary folks you know, or other trans folks that you know, or even just human life as a whole, if you have, an LGBTQ person in your life, or even if you don't, if you give a damn about people like me, then try to get a hold of one of your representatives, give them a call, send them a letter, tell them to back this bill. The article that we posted earlier from the LGBTQ bar, which I'm going to send to Naka and tell him to put in the description as well, has information on the name of the bill and reasons to back it. It's got a link to the bill itself. Take a look at it. if you live in a red state, you're the person who's got the chance to have the most impact, because folks who live in blue states, chances are your representative probably already backs the bill. So if you feel like if you've ever had like any inclination to try to make a difference, this is the time to do it. And they do pay attention. Like not nearly as many people as you think actually do this stuff and put any effort into it. Like folks who do pay attention to these things, it does make a difference. It makes it clear that at the very least the issue's on people's minds. And right now, the invisibility of this is the reason why it's a defense that still exists. It still exists. Like, there are so many murders that happen. There are so many, it's the same problem with like mass shootings, right? There's so much of this stuff that happens that any individual case tends to fall by the wayside. People get outraged about the latest trans person who got murdered for a few days and then forget about it, so long as the story is no longer sensational. Show that we care even when there isn't somebody's face on the news to care about.
Yeah. And when you call your senator or your congressperson, know that you're not going to talk to that person.
No, you're going to talk to their
people.
Staff.
Yeah, talk to their people. Let them know why you're calling. Clearly state the reason for your call and your gripes. But don't have this expectation that you're going to call and talk to Senator Grassley, because you're not.
That said, if you show up for a town hall, which they do on occasion, then you can.
Town halls, but cause pressure. Like, these senators, they care about reelection. And if they think that their constituents are actually turning on an issue, well, it doesn't even matter what they personally believe anymore. All that matters is their personal power. And they'll vote for it just to get your damn vote and to keep their damn job. But you got to put the pressure, and too many people just don't think that call means anything. It does. There's got to be enough of them, but it does.
Yeah, and if you do get a chance to show up for a town hall, fucking say something. Like, flat out tell your senator or your House representative. House representatives are more likely to do town halls, to be honest. Like, if you have a state Congress, if you're in one of those states who has legislation that is currently being proposed, give your state congressperson a call. Not in the least because you are more likely to actually get to talk to them if you call a state congressperson as opposed to your national representative.
And the one of the smallest things you can do is not allow this bigotry in the people that in your life around you. Don't sit there and just let it slide. Call it out. Make them aware of it. These are human beings too.
I'm human, I think. No, actually, I'm a snake.
Yeah, you're a snake, Calon.
Yeah.
And remember, everybody, like, trans people are people. Like, trans rights are human rights. Like, this is a major problem. You can try to argue, well, it's less than 1% of the population or whatever the percentage is. Well, celiac disease is less than 1% of the population, and yet, there are medical treatments for celiac disease. Like, LGBTQ people, gay people make up something like 5% of the population, and yet we fought to get them marriage rights. Just because a group is a minority group, just because there aren't as many of them, just because they aren't the vast majority of people that exist in a country, doesn't make their problems any less valid and important.
And the ideal of this country is equality for all. Thomas Jefferson wrestled with this when he was writing that Declaration of Independence. It's this country. It's like that old Gladiator movie with Russell Crowe, and Marcus Aurelius talks about the dream that was Rome. This country is a dream, and we're still trying to live up to that dream. And too many right now are trying to push us back into the dark past, the horrific past that we've had. They want that past back again. We need to achieve the dream of America, and we're getting there, but we got to keep up the pressure.
Well, and for what it's worth, Jared asked in the chat, would email work too? Technically, it does. However, what I have heard from Congress people, because I have helped out with political campaigns and things before, I did voter registration at HempFest. I was a part of the Occupy movement, which is more of a protest, but like there were a few people there, like in the Seattle area, who were supportive that I got to know. I've actually had lunch with a congressperson when I was helping run a nonprofit. That's a story that I'll tell someday in the future. But the point is what I have heard from staff and from volunteering and from congresspeople themselves, state congresspeople in particular, is that phone calls get logged as a basically tally marks around issues. The more succinct and quick you can get through your phone call, the more likely you will be to be logged. Emails are kind of second level. If it's a form email, it'll also get logged in a similar way. If it's particularly touching, it might get forwarded, but chances are it'll probably just be logged with a tally mark, same as the other. However, actual mailed letters are more likely to land in your congressperson's hand if they are not form letters, because you took the time and like spent the money on the postage. Basically, like you obviously give a damn if you wrote an address on an envelope and spent money on postage.
And especially if it's letters I've actually read is the best way to really get a politician's attention. Outside of just massive numbers of calls, like there's been a couple times when we've actually shut down government, especially at the beginning of the Trump administration, just by flooding Congress people's telephone systems.
Mm-hmm. So, like, any way that is best for you, like, to get into contact with your congressperson, anything at all is better than nothing. So, if email is the best thing that you can manage to do, like if you've got social anxiety and you can't get on the phone, or if you don't have the money to spend on stamps and envelopes and other things, because let's face it, who the fuck has stamps laying around? Like, most of us even pay our bills online nowadays. Like, if if email is the best thing for you, then do it. It's better than not doing anything. I was just giving you guys the recommendations for what I understand is the most likely way to get a congressperson's attention. So if you have the means and the opportunity to do it, that is the best thing that you can do.
And the main thing is just being active. If more people were just active in the political process, too many in America they think they're active in the political process, but not really. They go vote, but that's not it. We have a responsibility as voters, as people that partake in this democracy. And we can change it if we take our power back. The problem is right now the oligarchy has it all. That's a political discussion. But when it comes to humanity, it should be a no-brainer. You read stories like the stories that we've read to you tonight. You know people. We're all part of this community now. This is a no-brainer. I am really excited, actually, from that last part, Allie, when you read all the states that are trying to overthrow allowing this defense.
A number of them have already passed it.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
Well, and if your state was not on that list, that goes double for you to like email your national Congress people and your state representatives. Tell them this is something you want in your state. The more states move towards this legislation, it's much like medical marijuana was, right? The more states that move towards this legislation, the more states that push for these positive changes, the more national pressure is going to be applied for this sort of thing to become a nationwide policy. That is how change happens. When you get the majority of the states that are talking about this, then at that point, DC is moved to act.
Yeah. And I want to thank both of y'all for being a part of this stream. And I want to give Calon a chance to say anything she needs to say before we close out. I want to thank everybody for watching. Once my work schedule gets back to somewhat normal, I'm going to schedule a normal show again. But I really enjoy these smaller panels to where we can really go in depth to the topic and the conversation. And I think that we've actually covered a lot of ground here tonight. And I would hope to see some other allies do something like this in their own way. Just shed some light, because they don't have to fight alone. We can be there with them.
So for Richard Madsen, to answer your question, I think they open all their mail. Like they do, so long as there isn't like some sort of like
they don't. No, they don't open the mail personally. What they do
Oh,
is
I'm talking about staff. Like the staff opens all their mail.
yeah, but I think it's checked first for some of them.
Well, they put it through a scanner to make sure there's nothing inside of it. But in terms of like stuff getting passed through, they do open all the mail that doesn't have like powder or anything suspicious in it. So I don't think you'd have to put a phrase on the outside of the envelope, apart from obviously the address and all that stuff to get it sent. I think the most important thing is if you decide to go that route, making sure that you like address it to the proper congressperson, like somebody who is in your district, and put your return address and name on them so that they know it's one of their constituents. Because if people who are not constituents of a congressperson contact them, the staff won't even log it.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to try to be an outsider involved in other politics of other areas, the best way to do that is to donate to the politicians of that area that you support.
Yeah, like trying to call a congressperson that is not your congressperson, you will not be tally marked. One of the first things they ask you is for your address. So that's one of the reasons I linked the website that I linked, so that you can figure out who your Congress people are. You can also go to your state Congress's website to figure out who your state Congress people are. Both of the senators for your state are your senators, but your House representative is based on your district. So you need to figure out what your district is before you contact anyone in the House.
Yep, exactly.
So anyway, I'll toss it back to Calon, but I just wanted to answer Richard's question because he added me.
Oh yeah, I didn't miss. Yeah, I haven't missed any super chats tonight. Good, because I haven't really. Sorry, Chad, I haven't paid as much attention as usual. But
I didn't see any super chats tonight, which is a sad face.
It's sad face, but important discussion. Yeah, whatevs.
You actually had a pretty damn healthy viewer count this entire stream. This hit very similar to our religious discussions, which means that your audience is getting used to your politics.
Yeah. And I think the audience knows that this is an important issue to me.
And more importantly, I haven't chased everyone off yet.
Yeah, Calon is.
Calon hasn't banned everybody yet.
Calon hasn't been the snake tonight.
Well, Calon has been. Calon is always the snake, but Calon has not had the ban hammer tonight. Calon has been calm. Calon.
Well, I mean, this is Calon's issue. I mean, there's nobody else I wanted on this stream than Calon to talk about this issue. In fact, when I first started thinking about doing this, the edited video I did on it, I told Calon I wanted to do a stream on the gay/trans panic defense so I could rant and rage about this stupid defense.
Yep. This red, inhumane defense, which makes it to where my life isn't worth as much as others.
So, Calon, do you want to do your version of the Sticks and Stonehenge plug? Since we are going to be sometime in the next week or two, we've been trying to get our shit together to start doing the responses and stuff that we've been talking about. And we're going to be doing a really interesting stream on Wednesday.
So yeah, Wednesday, come and join us to talk about genocide. Because, we gotta move from gay trans panic defense to genocide. That's a logical progression. Trust me.
Yep, we're going to be talking about the Kurdish conflict with Turkey specifically.
Yeah, really dark times there. So get your cigarettes, right? And no, don't. I don't encourage smoking, actually. Though you'll probably want to after the stream. So
get your weed.
Get your weed.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, because you're just gonna want to say fuck the world afterwards. So yeah, come see Sticks and Stonehenge. We'll be doing stuff on the Kurds and what exactly is going down over there and implications of that, particularly some of the religious aspects of it with like the Yazidis and whatnot. And yeah, it won't be a good time, but it won't be a good time in the way that genocide is never a good time. But it's a conversation that needs to be had. And
the more fun videos.
Oh, yeah, and aside from that, I should talk about the actual fun stuff. Yeah, so our art is coming along pretty slowly, but it's coming along very well. and soon we'll be releasing a little series going after the biggest polytheistic YouTuber on YouTube, Spirit Science.
Fuck Spirit Science. So Spirit Science managed to piss both of us off just on the videos that were sitting on their homepage. Calon, you want to talk about your particular trigger, or do you want me to troll you and you can troll me back?
So the thing with Spirit Science is that they tell us that all we really need in life are crystals. Crystals serve us perfectly. You don't need any medical doctors or nutritionologists or whatever the hell you call them. Sorry, what were you saying, Aliakai?
Apparently Tiamat is a Sumerian god.
You're canceled. Wow.
Well, I mean, apparently iron is also a macronutrient. So, in other words, both of us
iron is a macronutrient.
So, in other words, both of us immediately found something to be incredibly pissed off at. So,
I've never even heard of this person.
They're 700,000 subscribers. Apparently, a lot of people have.
Wow.
So, both of us are incredibly pissed. Both of us want to do something about it. We are going to be launching a series sometimes in the next week or two, we hope, on Spirit Science and how bunk their shit is, starting with their summary of the Sumerian creation myths and the bizarre astrological associations that they assign to them, and continuing with their series on, I'm going to be putting the most gigantic air quotes, like, that the Earth has ever seen around nutrition, because they get just enough right to make the shit that's incredibly wrong make you so much angrier. They called iron, calcium, and potassium
iron is a macronutrient. Don't let the person below me tell you differently. She's wrong.
I'm gonna cry. Like, I'm going to rage and then cry.
Wow. Oh yeah, so lots of good material coming from y'all's Sticks and Stonehenge, which the link is in the description below, so you can go there and sub right now.
So yeah, we are working on getting those videos together. We're working on getting art together for them. If you guys want to see a bunch of pagans go after some fluffy bunnies, and you want to see what we mean when we use that term, come hang out with us on Sticks and Stonehenge. We will see you on Wednesday night at 9 p.m. EST, and hopefully you'll be able to catch our Spirit Science reactions pretty soon.
EST, not EST.
I said EST.
EST.
I said EST, damn it. I said EST.
You said
there was
no
no
PST.
Nope, I said EST.
Naka, did you hear PST? I'm pretty sure she said
I think
PST.
I might have.
Yeah, see, Naka.
I hate you all. I hate all of you. I hate everything. Just, like, fuck right off.
So I have a fucked up week. Like my work schedule is so when I got Saturday night off to do Utah Outcast, it fucked my work schedule up. So I've had to reschedule a
Wait, Noka's not allowed to.
I'm not allowed what?
Wait, Noka's not allowed to kill himself out on his own channel. I'm kidding.
I just I should announce to everybody that I'm not sure if I'm going to actually have a panel show this week. The way things are working out. I think we're hoping to reschedule.
What, we're not a panel show?
Huh?
We're not a panel? You forgot about us already?
No,
I'm kidding.
Well, this is technically a one-on-one with Ali Akai here as a conversator and moderator. But this is like the new form of my one-on-ones now.
Well, what moderation? Like, I've just been in here to chime in and add links.
That's more than I've done.
But so yeah, the week is a little messed up this week. And my daughter's still awake for some reason. So I gotta find out what's going on with that. So we're gonna get out of here. But Tuesday, I'm supposed to be on End Time. I gotta reach out to them because I have to work on Tuesday now. So I hopefully can get the stream to start earlier, or I only have an hour. Are
you going to be home on time for the other big guest that we may or may not be announcing, depending on how he replies?
Well, that's so Tuesday was our original day for that.
Yes, but it was late at night, so I wasn't sure if you were still going to be able to make it.
I'm not sure. I'll have to. I think I'm forgetting a part. So yeah, hopefully, yeah. If we'll make that happen.
Do we want to announce the big guest? Like, because we had originally scheduled that for either 9 or 10 p.m. EST, and if you think you'll be home by then, we might still be able to do that.
I mean, 10 would be probably more. I'd have to look at the schedule because I do have a close night. I'm not sure what my close night is. So I have to look at the schedule. So yeah, let's not announce it yet. I'll look at my schedule.
Okay. We do want to announce, though, Mr. Bitchmade may or may not be arguing with a certain moderator on your channel with another certain moderator being sitting in on it.
Oh, can I ban someone? Who can I ban?
The argument between Jill and John Peterson and the demand that was made. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, John has offered to debate Jill with a female moderator with Ali Akai. Specifically, I mean, it's an open invitation. We're more than willing to have it here. But we all know that Jill is bitch-made and isn't going to show up with a woman in the room. So it's probably not going to happen. No. Well, I mean, Jill did let AR onto the stream, but I haven't seen it. But I've heard there was a moment.
I mean, Jill doesn't believe in trans women, so yeah. Jill will misgender you if he has you on his stream.
Yeah. I mean, repeatedly on purpose. Jill,
But yeah, that was one of the big ones. Was John Peterson? Jill challenged John Peterson to a debate, but demanded that I had to be the moderator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll see if that happens. We all know it probably won't because Jill is a misogynist bastard.
She's a coward.
Yeah. So I mean, Jill is Jill. Saturday, I will be filming. I will be on the GDC with John, and I'll be filming with the Utah Outcast that evening. So yeah, that's my announcements. But mainly, yeah, my work schedule is messed up. It'll be back to normal next week, and we can really get back to normal. Hopefully, we're gonna have a big stream later Tuesday evening than we had initially planned.
Yeah, there's big announcements potentially coming for the channel for either Tuesday or Thursday. I'm hoping that if this guest can make it 1 hour later, which I don't see why they wouldn't, any lefties in our audience are probably going to be pretty damn excited. So I'm gonna leave that teaser there and see if I can convince him to come a little bit later.
See, I'm looking at my schedule right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Look,
of course, Tuesday's my late night, so I won't even be home till like 11.
All right. Well, I'll see if I can get him to move it to
the spoil it now and say that's Benedict Sarkeesian.
Yeah, this is the workings of YouTube, y'all. My schedule got messed up.
Sarkeesian. So, all right, so we're going to see if we can get the big guest rescheduled for Thursday, and if we can, then announcements will be forthcoming. I'll probably ask you to tack it onto one of your morning streams or to stick it into one of your recorded, videos.
Yeah, I could easily do like a morning stream with the chat, and interact with the chat, and make an announcement.
So, but yeah, let's hope that we can get a reschedule. When I had talked to them, they originally said anytime after Monday should be fine. So unless anything's changed, let's see if we can get them on for Thursday. All right, you ready to do your sign out, Knock?
Yeah, I am. My daughter is up, and we've got to deal with her diabetes. So yeah, I'm gonna get out of here, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this great conversation. Calon, thank you so much. Ali, as always, just brilliant. This is going to be a conversation that's going to continue. Maybe not necessarily the defense conversation, but definitely the civil rights conversation. This is what I want to talk about, and it's why I argue with the fundamentals. So everybody have a good night, and we will see you soon.